Hello everybody, this video is about using AWS through awseducate to start a VM image and access it via SSH. So let's get going with that. I'm assuming that you've watched the previous video and logged on already to awseducate. So we have to use awseducate to get into the classroom. So we go to the classroom. I've clicked on My Classrooms already, My Classrooms, and you should see Linux 2, which is the one I'm asking you to use. And you will end up being redirected to the classroom and you'll see this. So there's some links that you may want to have a look at on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side we have the account status. The most important thing is to keep an eye on your remaining credits. I've had a few instances running for a while, so as you can see it's not using a lot of credits, but I don't know when it's updated. So you should be okay if you leave your images running. It's just keep an eye on it. So what we really need to do here is to go to AWS console. So notice that here we were at Vecorium, which is the awseducate third party, and now we're on the management console. So this is where we start our work from. So as you can see here, we have the user ID information, federated login from Vecorium. I have my account number, and these I don't really have access to a lot of these because awseducate gives you a limited set of the facilities that you can use. And here notice I'm using the East US 1 zone, so that's the closest geographic zone to Montreal, so I'm using that one. And we can use others, as we see here. We're not going to do that right now. And most of the support information, some of the documentation we have access to and training, but some things you can't use. So it's just a trial and error thing. We definitely cannot use this, the shell. So the shell says no, but so what we have to do is we're going to, we can't use the shell, essentially. For now, we don't need the AWS command line, but we may get into that eventually. So now we're going to create our VM. So these are, this build a solution, there's some learning and building. So these are kind of a step-by-step thing to build a virtual machine, build a web app, build a virtual service. We can't use Lightsail because that's not available under awseducate. So we're going to launch a virtual machine. So here it says step 1, choose an Amazon machine image, and I want you to read here what it says about a machine image because it will be on the exam. And in this list we have a whole bunch of different images. So it's a digital snapshot of a fully configured system. So what we have here is Amazon has its own AMI, and there's quite a series of them. I suggest you have a look at them. And then down here, what we're going to do is so as you can see, SUSE, there's Mac OS, there's even Windows Server. There will not be Windows Desktop because of licensing issues, but here we have Windows Server, and we're going to select x86 because we cannot use ARM with awseducate. So we're going to use Ubuntu Server 20.04 LTS. And the difference between server and desktop, which is we have desktop in our vSphere VMs, the difference between the two of them is really just has to do with the packages that are installed. So for example, in this server, SSH is automatically installed. We don't have to install it. And it says root device type EBS, virtualization HVM, and ENA enabled yes. So let's select this. Sorry, before we use it, I'd like to explain EBS. So EBS is block level storage. So it's a type of storage that that AWS provides. These are all types that AWS provides. I would like you to look them up in the user guide so that you understand them. But so that's elastic block storage. And HVM stands for hardware virtual machine. So there are different types of virtual machines. Hardware is the one that this is used for. Also look it up. And ENA enabled says that elastic network adapter is enabled. So the term elastic is used often to talk about these services because we can stretch them to be whatever we need, and we can shrink them back. But have a look at each of these in the user guide to see that you understand them. And I also wanted to just go through this quickly. So we can save our own AMIs, but these of course will be gone when the awseducate credits are gone. There is a marketplace where we can buy certain services and AMIs, and then there are some community supplied AMIs. We're not going to use the community supplied, we're going to use the ones that are kind of standard. Some of them that are showing are community supplied. Anyway, so this is this one is from the same thing from Canonical, but we're going to use the ones from Quick Start. So, but there are others you can play around with if you want to. So I'm going back here. I'm going to now go down and select the Ubuntu Server 20.4. I'm going to select that. So we select the image that we want to use. Now we have to select the an instance type. So the instance type is essentially what kind of hardware do we want emulated for our system. So if we have a system that does heavy processing, we're going to need a lot of CPUs and a lot of memory. But for our purposes, we want to use the least amount of resources, so we're going to choose Nano. So these are just names. So we want to use a limited number of resources, so we're going to use Nano. And notice here it has 1 CPU and half a gig of memory. And the block storage, the elastic block storage, and then performance, like we're not worried about the performance, and version 6. So we're going to use the smallest one. So now we could look at the configure instance, add storage, add tags, blah, 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 but we can also launch from here. So since I don't want to do any special configuration or add any extra storage or tags, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to review, and I'm going to use the standard security group. So maybe let's look at the security group first. So as you can see, the standard security group for this image allows incoming SSH. So that's what we want, so that's good. So we've done the instance type, we've chosen that. Nano, we've chosen an AMI. We chose Ubuntu 20.4. We were choosing Nano, and we're not doing anything to configure the instance. We don't want to mess with that. We're not adding any extra storage or tags. The security group is good, it's standard. We're going to review and launch it now. So I've got a couple of warnings. Don't worry too much about the warnings. What they're saying is this one is saying that it's open to the world. We're going to look at that. And it says not eligible for the free usage tier. So that's okay because we're using the credits from awseducate. So let's take a quick look. We have instance type Nano, security group, SSH. So what it's saying, what that warning is saying, this one, security is saying it's open to the world. So we can read this, right, because we know IP tables. So this says we're allowing SSH over TCP, which SSH port 22, and it can come from anywhere. So the problem that it's telling us about is you're saying you're allowing SSH from everywhere. Do you really want to do that? Often you don't want to do that, but we want to be able to get to it from our desktops, from Dawson's VM. So we want to launch it. We want to use that. So we're now going to launch it. So these are warnings. They're not errors, so they're okay. I'm going to allow them to go through. So now this is where we have to, I already have some key pairs that I'm using, but when you do this for the first time, you're going to have to create a new key pair. So I'm going to give the new key pair the name demo, let's try 440 demo. And so once I've typed in the name, it's going to allow me to download the key pair. So the key pair is something that we have to be very careful with. We have to keep it because we're going to have to use it. So now I'm going to download the key pair. I don't want to open it, of course, I want to save it. And notice the launched instance. So now that I have the key pair, it's going to let me launch the instance. So I'm going to launch the instance. So it says this is good. My instance, the green box is good because it shows me they're launching. I don't have any red here. And I can do this. We're going to do that next. Connect to the instance, and then here's the guide that you can read information from, and the free tier. We don't have to worry about free tier right now, but let's have a look at the launch log. Successful, 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 so we're good. And now let's have a look at our instance. So that launch gave me a filter. I'm gonna get rid of it, and as you can see, I have other instances that I've already launched. The first time you do this, you'll only have one, but the one that I just started is right here. So I'm going to click on it, and here we see we have the information about the system that was started. This is here because we don't there's certain things we can't do with AWS Educate. We have, for the virtual private cloud, which we're not using, we have private IP address and DNS information. And this is what we're going to use. We're going to use the public DNS. But we know it's running, so let's look at some of the details. So these details tell me what the AMI image comes from, the location of it, where it is in the system. When I launched it, here's the key pair name. And then we have security. So in security, we can see we have some rules. So these rules are 22. That's the one we saw there. All outgoing is allowed. So this is exactly like the packet filter that we set up in our IP tables lab, or starting this way anyway. So we're allowing incoming from anywhere, port 22 over TCP, which is SSH, and the outbound rules are this. And if I want to change these rules, I will click on this. I'm going to leave them for now, but there's my inbound rules, outbound rules, and I don't have any tags. So let's go back to the EC2, get to my, running instance. So we have security, and then there's networking, which is the same information that was on the first page, the details page. And then storage, let's see what the default storage for this is. It's EBS, of course, and it's shown to our Linux instance as dev SDA1, so a serial device. One volume, one partition. And then here we have the information about this volume. This is the volume ID, and this is the size of it. So we have 8 gig. That's enough for what we want to do. It's not encrypted. We could encrypt it if we want. That's something that we could have set. And then delete on termination, yes. So that means that when I delete this image, so when I get rid of it completely, it's going to be deleted. And then we have status check. So there's some status information here. It takes a bit oh, sorry, not this one. So this is still initializing. Let's look at monitoring. So this will come up in a minute. So here we see the monitoring information, which isn't much because it hasn't been running for long. But if I look at my other instances, say for example this one, and I look at the monitoring, this one's been up for a day or two. So it's going to have, but nothing much has, so this is status check, whether it failed or not, that would be bad. And then utilization of CPU, network. So there's a lot of interesting information here that we may or may not want. So now that we've got it running, what we want to do is access it. So the next step is going to be accessing it through SSH. So now that my instance is running, I want to access it. And I'm going to access it using SSH. So remember, I downloaded the keys for this instance, and they were called 440 demo, and it was a file called PEM. So since I downloaded them on my VM, I can just look and see where they are here in the downloads directory. So there they are. Now what I've done is I've created a directory called AWS, so that everything to do with AWS goes in there in my home directory. So what I want to do is I want to copy, or maybe I'll move it because I want to make it sure it's secure. I want to copy it here. So there we go. Let's see what type of file the system thinks it is. 40. It knows that it's a private key. So now I need to use that to access my VM. So let's try it. So what I need to do is I need to use SSH, and I'm going to use the DNS name, so I'm copying that, and I'm going to paste it here. Let's see if we can paste it. So that's my DNS name. Sorry, the DNS entry for my VM. So what I'm going to do is use SSH. I need the -I to use the PEM key file. And then the user ID, the default user ID on Ubuntu AMI images is Ubuntu. So if you're using a different type of image, it'll be a different default user ID. So I'm going to now use my key to access remotely access my VM. I'll say yes. And there it's giving me a warning. It says the permissions of 664 for the PEM are too open. So it's telling me you've left this key open to being accessed by anybody. So let's have a look. And indeed, my key is open to anybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use chmod group minus rwx. I'm just going to do the whole blanket thing, even though I know it doesn't have it. So not just group, I want group and other. So user is the first one, the owner of it, and then group and other. So let's look at it again. So that's much better. It now has 600. So let's see if if I can use it with SSH. Yes. So now I am logged on to my VM. And notice it's showing me the virtual private cloud IP address. But if I use IP address show, I see that I have, oops, what is it? Oh, so it's doing some port routing for me. So I don't see the actual IP address, which happens to be 34.229. This is all being routed internally by AWS for me. But the DNS, when I access that DNS entry, it brings me here. So let's do netstat to see what's running. And I can use sudo. This user has access to that. Oops. Netstat command not found, so I will do sudo apt install net tools, I think it is. Now I should be able to use netstat. There we go. So I can see what's going on here. I have a DNS running. So that's systemd resolved, which we've already played around with. I have an SSH daemon that's installed by default. And then here's my connection from my from Dawson. So this is giving me Dawson's external IP address, ephemeral port. So there's masking done at Dawson for this. And then there's a time wait on a web server, and here's the server listening, the SSH server listening, and so on. So this is everything that's going on, and we have successfully launched and accessed our VM. So now that I'm finished, this is all of the processes that are currently running. So I'm going to now exit, and I'm going to try pinging that name just to see what it resolves to. So because it should resolve to 34 blah blah blah. Yeah, it does. So I can't really ping it because ping is blocked, but it's giving me the IP address, and the IP address is the IP address that shows here. So there's some internal routing done by AWS so that we get to that box, but we don't have to deal with that. So there we go. We have now set it up and accessed it, and we can start configuring it. Thank you.